Advisory Committee, City of Lowell, for our regular meeting on Monday, June 12th, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sue, roll call, please.
Commissioner Cadwalder.
Here.
Commissioner Chambers.
Here.
Commissioner Ellis.
Here.
Commissioner Gadula.
Here.
Commissioner Schraven. Here. Commissioner Plank is absent, and Chair Barker.
Here. Do I have a motion to excuse Colin?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Support.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Colin is excused. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of our previous meeting, April 10th, regular meeting? Mike? Is there a second?
Second.
Dave? Any discussion? Sue, voice vote?
Commissioner Cadwalder.
Yes.
Commissioner Chambers.
Yes.
Commissioner Ellis.
Yes.
Commissioner Gadula.
Yes.
Commissioner Schraven. Yes. And Chair Barker.
Yes, thank you. Public comments and communications concerning items not on the agenda. Anybody out there? Seeing none, we will go to 5, our old business, sign ordinance. Andy, you want to walk us through it, please?
Yes. So by way of background, this is something that we've been, by we, I mean staff, has been looking at and working on kind of off and on over probably a couple of years. What precipitated all of this was back in 2015, there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Reed v. Town of Gilbert, and the significant holding from that opinion was that you cannot regulate the content of signs. So any provision that, or any ordinance or something that any local unit of government would have nationwide can't regulate the content of the speech on a sign. That's really what it came down to. And so as a result of that, communities all over the place, and of course including Michigan, have had to look at their sign regulations to make sure that we're not regulating content. And so Lowell, like virtually everybody else at the time, has an ordinance that does regulate content in some way, shape, or form. Some examples of that would include we define specific types of signs based on their content, right? So we have signs that are called political signs. We have signs that are called real estate signs. We have signs that are called advertising signs. We have signs that are called, I'm sure I'm missing something. You get the idea. There's a bunch of signs where we're saying this is a specific type of sign that is subject to a certain type of regulation because of what it says. And this Gilbert decision basically said you cannot do that. You can regulate the location, the zoning district, the size, whether or not they're illuminated, what they're made out of, and all these other aspects, but you can't talk about or regulate what we say. And so this is a response to all of that, and is an attempt to develop a content-neutral sign ordinance for the city. So this would completely replace what's in your zoning ordinance right now, Chapter 20. And so we provided 2 copies for your packet. One's a red line version, which might be kind of hard to read. We also provided a clean copy that is a little bit easier. So we'll just kind of walk through some of the highlights real quick. This is something that's going to take a few meetings to get through. This will eventually have to hold a public hearing before the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council. There's a few things in here that as we've kind of worked on it, there are some areas where Sue and I have kind of struggled to figure out, like, okay, well, what kind of sign is this? How long can they have it there? And signs are notoriously hard to regulate anyways because people are creative and they want to promote their businesses. And sometimes that leads to some, tension between staff and a business owner who wants to have a lot of signs. And we're trying to, in some cases, reduce the number of signs and how big they are and cut down on some of the visual clutter or some of the, possible safety issues or aesthetics, things that kind of come into play. So we're trying to work within the confines of the ordinance, obviously, within the new set of rules that Reed has provided us, so we have to really think about how we write the standards and how we define certain types of signs, because it has been a lot harder over the last several years. So the first section, Section A, the purpose. So this is language that we worked on with the city attorney. It really is just clearly stating that this is intended to comply with Reed, that we're looking to promote safety, to promote sort of efficiency in communications, and to allow businesses to transfer information to either drivers or pedestrians or whatever the case may be, to preserve the quality of the landscape, things of that nature. We have a message substitution clause in here in subsection B, which basically just says that non-commercial copy can be substituted for commercial copy, or any other non-commercial copy, so you can change the words around and go from non-commercial to commercial speech on your sign. And then we have some additional findings. It talks about content neutrality, freedom of speech in fairly general terms, and just sort of really stating strongly that it is the city's intent through this ordinance to uphold and comply with these principles. In section 20.02, this is largely unchanged from the previous ordinance. So this black text that you see here, that's already existing in the ordinance. So where it's black, we're really not proposing to change anything. Else works out just fine. There's still someone seeking to erect a sign still needs to come in and obtain a sign permit. They would still have to turn in some kind of a plan. Usually these are pretty basic sketches, but we'll need to know where it's going, how big it is, what it's going to look like. Just some of the basics so we can tell whether or not it complies. And Sue and I do this on a quite regular basis. So that part will remain unchanged. 28.03 definitions, you'll see there's a lot of things deleted. These are all great examples of content-based regulations. So construction sign is, you can read through the striked out text that says a sign which identifies the owners, financiers, contractors, etc. So by saying a sign that identifies these things, that's talking about the sign's content. So we have to get rid of all these types of definitions. Same thing with development sign, directional sign, incidental sign, memorial sign, political sign, real estate sign. There's a lot. Right? So all of these signs are just taking out the whole thing. These are all basically just content-based sign types. And so we're not interested in trying to regulate them based on their content at all. And so we're just taking them out. Some other ones are there. So there is a few others in here that are just kind of clean up language and things that we think can make sense to us. And I think probably the largest part of our discussion when we get to that point will be how to deal with temporary signs, because there's a lot of different types of temporary signs. People are always coming up with creative new types of temporary signs that we haven't thought of yet. And so as we kind of work through this, we'll have to give some consideration either tonight or at future meetings about kind of an appropriate number and how long they should be staying up and things like that on both residential and non-residential properties. In 20.04, signs prohibited, that's basically unchanged. 20.05, general sign provisions, largely unchanged, except that we're fixing clarity and some minor adjustments here and there, but basically it's all the exact same that's there currently. 20.06 on page 8, this sign's not requiring permits. So every type of sign in the ordinance obviously doesn't require a permit. If somebody wants to put up just a small temporary sign, we typically don't make them come in and pay for a fee and get a sign permit for that, right? So we have some signs here like government signs, so the city can put up whatever kind of sign it wants as an exempt, as could the state or the county or the federal government. They can just go do stuff. That's pretty standard. Again, under 3 and 4, real estate sign, construction sign, again, we're getting into content-based language, so we're just taking all of that out. And we address this later on, but all of these types of exemptions, we're just getting rid of all of this language that is content-based, because we can't have this in here anymore. We've modified the language for internal signs, so think of this as like a directional sign within a larger parking lot that's telling you that, the main entrance is this way or the loading dock is that way. It's a small incidental sign. We changed around the language for those. Temporary signs, it's a little hard to read, but most of the temporary sign language here went away. We allow for 1 2-square-foot wall sign permitted on a parcel containing a home occupation. We don't care what it says, they're allowed to have.
And you were both ready.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on page 9. On the bottom of the sheet, it should be page 9,
Sure.
I'm about 3/4 of the way down.
Okay.
There's a lot of red, so it's kind of hard to read
Right.
through it all. So I have number 11, 1 2-square-foot sign located on a parcel containing a permitted home occupation. Lots of those sections there are going to be struck out. On next page, top of page 10, we talked about flags, we talked about sandwich boards. We're adding the mixed-use district, SC district, where one could have a sandwich board because frankly that makes sense. That's right adjacent to downtown. We have, or could have in the future, some additional businesses in that district. It's kind of set up for that, so we thought it made sense to allow those kinds of temporary signs. And we have some regulations for sandwich boards in there as well. So again, a bunch of changes there, but again, mostly you can see that we're identifying anything that is content-based and just taking it out completely. On page 20.07 is where we get into supplementary signs, and the first subsection here is under temporary signs. And I think this is going to be where we've tried to keep some of the language that we think works, but there's a bunch of stuff here that we'll need to talk about. So under subsections 1 and 2, we're making a distinction between non-residential properties and residential properties. So for residential properties under subsection 1, we have A through D. 1 temporary sign per establishment, not more than 60 days, not more than 32 square feet, and not illuminated. That's already in your ordinance, that's already there in black. We're not making any changes there. Certainly, we could entertain that, and we've had a few instances over the years where for grand openings or for something like that, or for other events, businesses that wanted more than just 1 temporary sign, but as we work through this, the sign ordinance, we're trying to, again, limit the clutter and the amount of stuff going on, be trying to limit the number of distractions on all these properties. So that's kind of where this comes from. We added a provision, subsection D, called interim signage. So sometimes we'll see that if a business is opening and they don't have a permanent sign up yet, this allows them to use a temporary sign, basically as a permanent one, until they can get the permanent one up. This would be not to exceed 60 days. So again, this would allow for a larger temporary sign, but it's still temporary, and the intent here would be to have it replaced by a permanent sign eventually. That would be in addition. It's something that we thought might make sense, if you guys agree, to sort of, again, facilitate new businesses that are coming into town. Sometimes getting things timed out correctly takes some time. And then under subsection 2, on residential lots, we have a provision for up to 4 non-permanent signs may generally be permitted, may be displayed on a pole or stake affixed to the ground, not to exceed 6 square feet per side, not more than 6 feet in height. May display non-commercial messages or on-premises commercial messages. And then, for example, including but not limited to messages conveying that it's for sale, the work is being performed on the site, things like that. So think about these signs, right? If you go and have your roof redone and your roofing contractor sticks a little temporary sign in the ground that says Marty's Roofs, that would be a permitted type of temporary sign. If it's for sale, this would also include political signage, right? So during the election, if someone wants to put 4 political signs in the yard, we would say, okay, 4 signs, don't care what they say, but you can have no more than 4. And again, so there's size limitations on all of this. We're trying to allow people the ability to either advertise that their house is for sale, or advertise your business, or advertise somebody else's business if it's like a contractor situation, or make whatever political statements they want to make. That's all fine. This proposes 4. There's no
No time frame?
No time frame. I mean, obviously they are temporary, so they're not intended to be there for years and years and years, but generally speaking, as long as they are well maintained and they're not causing problems, we wouldn't really put a time limit on them. And as we know, in some of these, most of them, they don't last that long. There's the wind or the snow or the snow plow in some cases, sort of knocks them over and they come out. But we could put a time limitation on them. You could go with a number less than 4. This is just something that we've seen works out okay in some other communities. So we put it in here, and that's, I think, something for the planning commission to talk about. Under number 5, permit. So this would require a permit for a non-residential lot, but not for a residential lot. So again, someone wants to come in and put up a temporary sign for their preferred city council candidate. We're not going to make them come in here and get a sign permit. They can just go to it. It's pretty standard practice everywhere. And we don't want to overburden staff or people from having to come in and do all this to put up a small little sign like that in the yard. So 5 would talk about what they have to put on their permit form. Again, on the bottom of page 11, top of page 12, all pretty much the same type of requirements that we have in here currently. The section on portable signs is unchanged, except that we changed the size limitation to 32 square feet instead of 35. That's primarily just to be consistent with other provisions in the ordinance that we have in place already. On page 12, we have a section here on changeable copy signs. So changeable copy, think about, those are the ones where you can switch out the words or the letters to make them say whatever you want. This would also include electronic reader boards on businesses. That would be a type of changeable copy. So those are addressed in here. Again, these are basically unchanged from the first iteration of this ordinance. It is currently in effect. And then in 20.08, signs permitted by zoning district. For the most part, this is unchanged in terms of the day-to-day usage of this chapter. When Sue and I are working on sign permits and somebody comes in and applies for one, we almost always, the first thing I do, we almost always flip right to these tables to figure out what zoning district they're in, what type of sign they're looking for, and then how big it can be. And we're not proposing to change any of those numbers. So in the residential districts, a non-residential use can have one ground sign up to 20 square feet. If you're in the C1 or PF, which is public facilities districts, same thing here. One sign, one ground sign not to exceed 32 square feet, or a wall or a marquee sign. In central business or mixed use, you can have a projecting sign, which are the ones that stick out perpendicular from the building face and hang over the sidewalk. So those can be 20 square feet. They never are that big, but they could be. And then again, we also allow for wall signs or marquee signs in downtown, obviously. And on page 15, the C3 district, again, exact same standards, a ground or freestanding sign not to exceed 48 square feet. And for wall signs or marquee signs, 20% of the wall surface. As we've looked at this over the years, 50 square feet is by default, because there hasn't been any spaces where 20% of the wall surface has resulted in a smaller than 50 square foot sign. So we propose to keep all of this exactly as it is. The construction and maintenance section is unchanged. The non-conforming section is unchanged on page 15 and 16. The attorneys suggested we add in a substitution clause and a savings and severability clause. So the substitution clause just says that signs containing non-commercial speech are permitted anywhere that the advertising or business signs are permitted, subject to the same regulations. So again, we're saying that if we're allowing for an advertising sign, then you can also use that same sign to make a non-commercial statement if you want to. And the savings and severability clause basically just means that if some part of this gets challenged in court and some part of it is declared to violate Reed, that the rest of it would remain in effect. You would sever out that part of it that is not compliant. That's what 20.13 means. So I know that's like a lot of information. I think a primary discussion for the Planning Commission, in my mind, is really this discussion on temporary signs. I think the staff, that's probably the part that Sue and I struggle with probably the most. We were getting some pushback from businesses just on that 50 square foot requirement, but it's worked out pretty well recently. We haven't had as many, as many
Cindy, what pages are you talking about on the temporary?
temporary signs. I'm thinking about pages 11, yeah, bottom of page 10, top of page 11.
So the South Bernard Century,
Yep, yep.
2007.
Yep, 2007A is temporary signs, and then we have A1 on non-residential lots, and A2 is on residential lots. That's, to me, probably from a kind of policy-making perspective, probably the most important area where planning commission input, I think, would be helpful. We can do this tonight, we can do it at a future meeting. I wanted to get something in front of you tonight, because frankly, I've been meaning to put this in front of you for a while now. I haven't had time to get to it, but it's something that we need to get done, and we need to get updated. So, I guess from there, Mr. Chairman, happy to take questions, and like I said, we'll eventually have to have a planning commission public hearing on this at a future meeting once we get it to a point where the planning commission is comfortable with it.
Commissioners, any thought?
Run out of red ink.
It was getting close, yeah. There was a lot. But it's important that we get it right.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Since we have the powers to be, any input from council?
I have a question. Is a sandwich board considered a portable, temporary sign? Because they're not set out every day, but then I'll see them set out along the street. So where does that, you said something mentioned about a portable sign, a temporary sign. Where does that lay all under?
We actually have a special exemption and regulation for sandwich boards specifically.
Okay,
So we would deal with them under that. So with a sandwich board, they're exempt. They don't require a permit, provided that they comply with the handful of standards that we have in the ordinance. And that's pretty much all already in there.
okay. I just was
Yeah, and
listening.
then part of that, Jim, would also be if the business is open or not. If they're not open, then they don't put it out. So that's why sometimes you see them, sometimes
Yeah.
you don't. I would suspect that.
And then during COVID, we allowed for an extra
Yes, I
sign
remember.
out too.
Sandwich board, what kind of square foot on a sandwich board? Is that both sides or each side? Is that clarified?
Yeah, 12 square foot per side, and a height of 4 foot, and a width of 3 foot.
Yeah, 4 foot tall, 3 foot wide.
Most all of ours on Main Street are 2 by 3.
Yeah, they're probably smaller than that. And they also have to be situated in a way that it doesn't obstruct pedestrian traffic on the sidewalk.
Another question I have is, who enforces it? Who goes out there and says, well, this thing was here, first put out on January 12th, and 2 months later, it's still out there? I mean, who keeps track of that?
Yeah, so we do that in cooperation with the police department. So if they see something where it's like, hey, the sign's been out here for a long time, do you know what's up? We will check it out. So sometimes it doesn't happen a lot, but if there's a fence or some other thing that goes up that doesn't look right, they will ask and say, hey, did you guys approve this, or what's going on? Then we'll work it out with them, and if there is a violation, then we will work with them. And then we'll work on it that way. It doesn't happen a ton, but there are a few times.
The biggest issue you have are the 21-day temporary signs and the feather banners. Those are the two
Yeah.
biggest ones we deal with.
Right.
And basically what we've told people with the feather banners is that you're allowed one, but if you take it, basically how we've said, if you take it like, treat it like a sandwich board, bring it at the end of the night, you're not gonna have an issue. That's how we kind of enforce that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
where's the four, the yard sign limit come from? Because the last two major elections, I've had more than 4.
Yep.
Because you're talking about local school board, congressional, house races, governor,
Yeah, it's just something that
proposals.
that's something that we've just used in some other communities. It seems to have worked well there. There's not any magic, rhyme or reason to it. If you want to go higher, you can go higher for sure.
But it's complaint-based enforcement like everything else, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on how aggressive the city wants to be. There are some communities that go out and proactively look for violations and deal with them, and there are some communities who don't.
And I also have a corner lot, right, so I have 6 here, 6 here.
Yeah, so you could, something like that, you could even do it per frontage or something instead of per lot.
Is it they can only go up 30 days before the election, they need to be taken down 30 days after the
Yeah,
election?
and I
That's how it used to be. I don't think you can do that anymore because of the Supreme Court ruling.
well, also you're gonna be, they're not made to last anyway, right? Most of them are cardboard or that super
Plastic
thin
use
plastic
stuff.
bag.
Yeah.
So if you're responsible with your yard, you're gonna take them down
Correct.
before any snow or wind anyway, but I just thought 4 was a weird number.
Yeah, we could, it is up to the planning commission and council, that could be adjusted. Either way, you could do it per frontage instead of per lot. You could do more, again, we're trying to find that balance between what's overwhelming and distracting versus what, what conveys information to the public.
And the planning commission can put one number in, and then when it goes to the city council, they can change it.
Yes.
Yeah, because us 4 live in corner lots.
Yeah.
I don't know how that ever happened,
Yeah. So, I mean, you could, corner lots are a good example. You could do, you could do it on a per frontage basis, right? So if you had a through lot where you had street frontage in front of your house and street frontage in the back, you could maybe have 4 on each, or if you had a corner lot, you could have 4 on this frontage and 4 on that frontage. I mean, it's up to you guys. I mean, I don't have a super strong opinion on a lot of the stuff either way. It's just, here's what works, and it's really up to you
You want
guys.
to have him put that in for the next iteration of this?
for like corner lots.
Yeah, and lots on both streets.
Yeah, that way.
It makes
then it's-
sense.
Yeah, that way then it's covered, and if anybody ever complains, we can,
Right.
that's in the ordinance. So.
And I think the number 4 is just fine for our purposes, especially if you've got a corner lot, then you've got 8 and.
Don't want any more.
Exactly,
Right.
yeah. Let's do that then, and then for the next iteration that you have.
Okay.
And then, commissioners, is there any reason why we can't do a public hearing at our next meeting and go over this? I don't see any reason why we couldn't do both at the same time. I mean, that's the only change that we're really looking at, I
Right.
think. Does that sound reasonable? Andy, can we do that?
Yes, if you make significant changes, you might, so the only risk with that is if you make a bunch of other changes to the ordinance and you have to just do a second hearing, because I wouldn't want to notice it in one form and then have a meeting, change a bunch of stuff, and then.
Let's go ahead and take that chance, and then, with the understanding that city council can always change it too.
Right.
So let's go ahead and take that chance, instead of having 2 more meetings on this, just have 1. Because I think we're all in pretty much agreement here, correct? And as long as we're in agreement on it, I would say let's go that route. And then we can pass it on to the city council for their consideration.
Okay.
They can always send it back to us.
Great.
Eventually, it's their final option.
Great. Yep, that's absolutely fine.
That's July 10th, right, the next.
I think so. Sounds about right.
Yeah, that'd be the next planning commission meeting.
Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Then at that next point here would be the new business, site plan review for West Michigan Auto Exchange. And again, Andy, you want to walk us through it?
Yeah, just a second. So West Michigan Auto Exchange, this will probably sound familiar to you because they also applied last year for a special land use permit and received a special land use permit to have a temporary vehicle sales facility at the fairgrounds property. This year, they are proposing the same thing, it's just in a different location. This would be in the Tractor Supply parking lot at 2153 West Main. So this is the same location as Jake's Fireworks is setting up soon, if they haven't already.
June 20th, I think that's right.
Yeah, so this would take place, so they tear down on like the 5th or the 6th or something, right after the 4th. This wouldn't start until July 20th and it would run through July 29th. They're proposing hours of operation from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. It would be a 10-day event. Again, very similar type of event here. I think they'd be a fewer cars, 50 to 60 used vehicles are proposed for the site, along with a 20 by 60 tent with tables, chairs, lights, etc. So this is processed under the zoning ordinance as an open air business. So we walk through each of the site plan review standards, and I think we have the applicant on Zoom. So Mr. Chairman, if you want to have them list something, it might be helpful to hear.
Okay.
Have them present information that I have. Yes.
Renee,
Yeah,
welcome.
can you hear me okay? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
we can. Thank you. Would you, in a brief, say 3, 4, 5 minute, explain to us what you want to do, and then stay on the line because we'll ask questions and go from there.
Sure. Similar, like you said, to last year, we would like to come to town. We would set up on a Wednesday. We would set up a tent that would house our customers in an office inside this tent. We would have the 50 to 60 vehicles for sale. In addition, we've left some customer parking room. We'll have restroom facilities for them. We would essentially be selling vehicles in the parking lot. I know I submitted hours, I believe it was 9 to 8. I think we've narrowed that down actually to 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. We would, and it's pretty much the same thing as last year. We will just bring 50 to 60 vehicles, put them for display in that Tractor Supply parking lot, and actually sell cars out of the parking lot for the 9-day duration. We have gotten obviously property owner approval, and I mean that's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Andy, you want to run us through the site plan review standards at this point? And I think that's A through F.
A2F, and then this
And then we'll hear all of them.
Yep.
And then we'll hear public comment at that point, and then we'll do commissioners.
Sure, yeah, so this is a special land use, so it requires a notice of public hearing, which was provided. So we'll start with the site plan review standards. So A, the uses proposed might adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare. Uses and structures on the site will plan to take into account topography, size of the property, etc. This is a developed site, not proposing any permanent improvements, obviously. There's a short duration for the event and limited hours of operation, so we don't anticipate any negative public health, safety, or welfare impacts based on that standard. Item B, safe, convenient, uncongested, and well-defined vehicular and pedestrian circulation shall be provided. There's existing points of ingress and egress on the site presently. It's all taking place within a parking lot they've shown on the site plan where there would be customer parking available. There's not a lot of information in terms of like emergency access, but it's a fairly open site, and as part of the review process, the emergency services personnel from the city would take a look at it, and if there's any concerns, obviously they would have to make some adjustments. Otherwise, we don't have any significant concerns there, just again because it's a fairly open spot. Item C, the arrangement of public or private vehicular or pedestrian connection to existing or planned streets in the area shall be planned. Again, it's only partially applicable anyways, to the extent that it is. It's a well-defined point of access, and we don't anticipate major traffic problems here either. And again, we're talking about a very short-term and short duration use. Item D talks about the removal and alteration of natural features, which there aren't any on the property. Item E talks about satisfactory assurance shall be provided that the requirements of city ordinances and codes shall be met, which would be addressed as a condition of approval. And E relates to consistency with the comprehensive plan, which in the master plan, this is a general commercial type of land use pattern that's articulated in the 2007 plan. And this would be consistent with that in our opinion. And that is all of it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the commissioners first. Are there any questions, concerns on the commissioner standpoint?
Is there any additional lighting that they plan on? I don't know how well lit the parking lot is. I just know all the other dealerships are pretty well lit up.
So the application indicates that they would have some lighting on the inside of the tent. I don't think there would be additional lighting on the outside, beyond that. I guess the applicant might be able to explain that a little better, but that's my understanding.
Renee?
That is correct. There is no additional outside lighting, just basically due to the fact that we close at 7 p.m. We just didn't feel necessary. There is going to be lights inside the tent in case of like inclement weather. If it's raining or something like that, we will make it bright inside the tent. But that is correct. There is no plan for any additional like light towers or anything.
And what about security concerns at night?
Again, last year we didn't do security. We didn't really feel a need for it. We keep, everything that is, anything that's in the tent is valuable, we would take with us at night. And then the vehicles are all locked up. So, I think last year the comment was made that, well, it's their vehicle kind of thing, and that's kind of how they are feeling too. So if you guys require security, by all means, but there is no current plan to have security at night.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? I'd like to open it up to the public. Anybody want to make a comment? Please state your name and address. Please state your name and address, please.
Cliff Yankovic, 329 North Monroe, and I also have a business at 208 East Main Street. I'm here to ask you to turn this down, just from the standpoint that we have several dealerships in Lowell, and over the last few years, they've spent a ton of money making their places look better, and they employ local people, and they spend money in shops and restaurants in town, and I don't really see any advantage to the city of Lowell, or the residents for that matter, in letting somebody just come and do a pop-up car store. I might even argue that the reason they want to do it here is because the dealerships have spent so much money making their car lots look so good. Last year I was I assumed that it was the local dealers that were doing it because they have in the past, and when I found out it was people from somewhere else, I thought that's really silly. So I'm asking you to vote no. Thanks.
Thank you.
DeVore, 424 Elm Street, Lowell. I would also like to speak out against it for a myriad of different reasons. You have somebody coming to you for a site plan review to hold an event in your community, and they don't attend the meeting where the site plan review is being reviewed to answer questions in person. I think it's undermining to the 3 dealerships we have in town who have invested money and time and energy to stay here when they could have went somewhere else with maybe more traffic. Ben Baker and Ziegler especially have put a lot of money into their property and time to stay here in the community, and they give back to the community. I'm involved in a lot of community events, and it's always easy to get help from the 3 dealerships that are here in town. I equate it very much to a Wild West snake oil salesman. Comes to town, gives you the cure for all your ailments, and then leaves town before you realize there's problems with it. And you can see that with used vehicles all the time. There'd be no follow-up, no warranty. The misleading advertising that comes out before these events too, I think, gives people a false sense of what they're gonna get when they go down there. I would argue that they don't meet item A, which I believe is community welfare, right?
Yeah, so A says that the uses would not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare.
I would argue that it would affect the public welfare because the public welfare of this community includes the businesses that operate here. And I think it would adversely affect the welfare of those businesses. I know last year, there were some people that thought it was put on by the local businesses, and I know that their salesmen and mechanics answered a lot of questions regarding sales from this that they had no idea what was going on. So I would argue that it doesn't meet standard A, and I would argue that it's overall a detriment to the community, and I would like to see the site plan review voted down. Thank you.
Drew Dubridge. I live at 9177 South Ferris and Grant. I'm here representing Benton Baker Auto Group, both the stores in Lowell, the Buick GMC store, and the Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram store. As a local dealer, we strongly oppose the proposed used car sale at the Tractor Supply parking lot. We do not support or appreciate these sale events for the following reasons. The marketing offers large prizes and appears that everyone who receives a flyer is a winner for the grand prize. When the customer arrives, they find out that they have not won the big prize, but receive something worth about $2. These are very high pressure events. Consumers are misled about what they are paying for and what the terms are. They market outside of Lowell, and due to misleading flyer, people drive here to get the prize. For many of these people, this is their first time to Lowell, and they leave feeling like they've been taken advantage of. They set up a tent and take hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the Lowell community, and nothing gets returned back to Lowell. They do not pay tax. They do not support local charities and events throughout the year like the local dealers do. They don't care about how they treat people because they have no connection to the Lowell community and probably will never see them again. Unlike local dealerships that have been here for years, we take pride in what we do. They have an unfair advantage due to little cost. They represent a stereotypical used car sales that the local dealerships have worked very hard in this community to rid themselves of that image. Last year, many people called our dealerships angry about their purchase, assuming that we had sold them the cars. And many of them needed repairs after they were sold. Bottom line is, they don't represent Lowell in a positive way. They only take as much profit as they can and leave town. I'd like you guys to vote.
Thank you.
Jim Salzville, 505 North Jefferson. I couldn't say it any better than these three gentlemen that said I think the community suffered last year from what the possibilities of what Benton Baker and Ziegler Ford offered the community as far as community support, continue, you see them at all the events and things like that part of it too. So like these three gentlemen, I'm in favor of not allowing this to happen at this time. Thank you.
There's a letter for public
Yes, I
comment
do
too,
have a
right?
letter.
So, please.
I am writing this letter to inform the city council members of my opposition to the proposed used vehicle sales event to be held at the Lowell Fairgrounds. As a local automobile retailer for many years in the city of Lowell, I find these events completely against the type of experience the local dealerships provide to the Lowell community. Their advertising and marketing is extremely misleading and is intended to lure people in with amazing prices only for the customer to find out that they have not won and received a token gift, typically of value of less than $5. This type of treatment only enhances the stereotypical used car salesman that we as local dealers strive to avoid at all costs. Not only is the marketing that is distasteful, but I feel it's unfair for someone to be able to come into our town for 10 days, grab as much profit as possible, when those dollars are never returned to the Lowell community. The local dealerships provide thousands of tax dollars annually, and we are one of the first on the community to support all of the great local causes that exist in Lowell. I am not opposed to competition, but should Mr. Primula want to do business in Lowell, I would ask that he invest in a storefront in Lowell and contribute his fair share back to the Lowell community as the rest of us do. Respectively submitted, Todd Landman, 2399 West Main.
Any other public comment? Renee, any comment from you?
No, I don't have any comments. We did make a charitable donation to a local charity last year. I mean, that's not necessarily advertised, but it was done. And I would argue that we are competition for the local dealers, but we are offering good prices, and we're not there to just take customers. We're there to expand our market area. We're in the Kentwood area. We are a local drive for these people. Should they have any issues with their cars, they could come to us and get their vehicle serviced as well. So I don't see it the same way, unfortunately, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public portion of it then, and commissioners, any further questions, discussions?
Last year when this came to us, I found it quite odd that we heard nothing from any of the dealerships. I don't know how that could happen, but it apparently did. And I think that was intentionally done so they wouldn't be, a time to say what they want to say. I do a lot of things in this community, and I can reach out to any of the dealerships and they help. It's what can we do? So I'm with these guys on their statement.
Anybody else?
Is there any kind of permit fee or anything associated with whether it be cars or fireworks or whatever it is? To make it look like at least whoever wants to have a sale is doing something, not just squatting and
Yeah, well, I mean,
type of thing, or?
there's a permit fee for the special land use and for this, process, but that gets spent on, I think that's not anything that positively, benefits your bottom line, I guess. The permits for this stuff aren't supposed to and can't do that, act as income, so there's not, to my knowledge, there's not a permit fee or anything like that that generates revenue for the city, so far as I know.
Yeah, we can only recover our costs, and that's what the permit fee is for, to recover the cost. I have a question. So there's a couple things. Obviously, we have a lot of dissent from the community regarding this. The question is if this does actually meet the special land use standards, what are the ramifications if this doesn't get approved? Also, can we just revise our ordinance going forward to maybe restrict these types of things in the future?
So I'll answer the first question first. So it's the planning commission after going through the rest of the standards. So we still have to go through the special land use standards. If after going through all of those, the planning commission finds that all of the standards are met, then you would have to approve it, in my opinion. If in going through here you find that one of them is not met, then you could turn it down. As to the second part of your question,